Welcome back to another episode of Raising Tech. Today I am joined by the one and only Kelly Stranburg, who is the Vice President of Healthy Aging and Longevity with Westminster Communities of Florida. I've known Kelly for what, Kelly, 7, 8 years by now, something like that.
Even
Um,
longer. I think we're going back like 12, 13 years, Matt.
I've only been in the industry since 2016, so I mean,
Okay, so 10 years. We'll say 10 or 11 years. Then
yeah,
I met you your first year.
you met me my first year. I mean, it could have
Mhm.
gone a lot longer because you were almost my high school gym teacher, which is another story for another day. But Kelly has just become one of my best friends in the industry. Her passion for older adults, technology, everything and anything, the bills too. It's just been awesome, awesome to see. And it's people like Kelly that really push this industry forward. So I'm excited to kind of jump into some stuff with you here, Kelly, today, my friend.
Thank you for having me. And I'm excited to talk about this topic, Matt.
Awesome. So, Kelly, before we jump into that topic, can you share a little bit about your story and how you ended up to where you are today?
Sure. Well, I'm an exercise physiologist by educational background, and I was doing corporate wellness for, wait for it, Philip Morris. So yes, people made cigarettes all day long and then came over to the gym to work out. um, but manufacturing was going overseas, and I had plenty of time before I had to find a new job, and went out on one of the job sites and found a wellness director role for a senior living provider based in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was like, oh, I I might be able to do this. And I've always gravitated towards an aging adult, even in my fitness and exercise science career. And I applied on Memorial Day. I'll never forget this. And they called me immediately. And I was like, y'all are working on Memorial Day? Lesson number one in senior living. We are 24/7, 365. And got hired just 6 weeks later. And funny, I got hired to go in and do fitness programming for this portfolio of life plan communities. And 4 months later, my chief operating officer, who I reported to, I was telling her a story about how I had been in memory care. And a resident was telling me all about how much he missed his sailboat and sailing. And our activities team had him coloring a picture of a duck. And it didn't sit well with me. So I went back to the office and I told her that story. I go, that doesn't seem dignified. I think we should be doing better. And I know I'm talking about stuff I don't know about. She goes, nope, you're fine. You get it organically. She goes, by the way, you will now be over all level of care programming. And we're going to throw in transportation, the concierges, and salon and spa. And my exact statement back to her was, have you lost your mind? And that was almost 20 years ago. And here I am, still, doing the good charge forward and making sure that programming really meets people where they're at in the most dignified, appropriate ways, while still engaging them from an interest level and making sure it's challenging.
I love that. Wow, talk about other duties as a sign there. No, that's so interesting too, and I know you care so much, and it's just been really awesome to see the impact that you've had, Kelly. And as someone who's kind of been in resident engagement, I'm curious, like when you think about like resident engagement today, how has that definition evolved from simply offering, those simple activities like, coloring a duck, let's say, to supporting a resident's overall sense of purpose, wellness, and longevity?
Oh my gosh. It's interesting to have seen even just in the last almost 20 years in my tenure here, it's been interesting to see the evolution of resident engagement, programming, lifestyle, whatever word we want to call it, right? Um, and it really comes down to what is the process that we take to get to know our residents? And I really think that resident, if you will, resident profile or the get to know you process, I think that's such a critical piece. And I know in the higher levels of care, that's been mandated in certain ways through an MDS process and even care plan meetings. But I think really what we've learned, especially in these last few years, is we need to be learning our residents on a much deeper level. But how do we go about that? What kind of repository do we store all of that powerful, valuable information? And I work at an organization where we have life plan community, or their life plan community. So we have all levels of care, right? So I'm a big believer in that. We want to learn as much about residents as possible when they move in to independent living. And if they do have to move through the continuum of care, we have all these rich details about who they are, because that could potentially influence or positively impact how we provide care, in memory support or memory care or long-term care. And just that resident story, that resident profile is just one of the most critical pieces. And when I reflect back, we've always asked kind of surface level questions like, what do you like? What do you not like? What do you do in your free time? Did you serve? Where'd you go to college? But there's so much more we could be learning about people. But then the conundrum becomes, where the heck do we store all that? And who has access to it? And I laugh, even when I went into a community to work in the midpoint of my career, which was weird. I was like corporate support, then I went to a community, then I came back out into these corporate support roles. And I laugh at myself, and sometimes I'm ashamed of myself that I was writing stuff on paper and I had the most insane Excel spreadsheet on earth. But it had all this powerful information that probably 50, 60, 70, 80 other team members should have had access to, and they didn't. And I'd be like, oh, well, I know this about so and so and so and so. It's in a folder in a cabinet in my office that's in the basement, locked. And thankfully I can laugh about it, but it also tells me how critical that piece of the puzzle is when it comes to resident engagement. Because the more you know your residents, the more you're able to offer and design what matters most to them.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And it's such an important piece of the puzzle, right? Like getting to know, like that's where relationships start. When I think of senior
Right.
living, um, it's the emphasis on the living aspect, creating those relationships. How do you create those relationships between residents, peers, and the staff, and really getting to know each other? And that's how we first connected too, over dinner, like where
Right.
we mentioned we're like kind of the area you were from, and I went to like a summer festival there, which those stories will stay locked up forever. But yeah, no, it's just really interesting to see, and I'm wondering, you know, with resident engagement, accounting to how you've seen it evolve over time, like what are some of the most exciting or meaningful innovations you're seeing right now, especially where technology is helping communities to create some more of these personalized experiences that we're talking about?
Well, it's funny, audience. I did reach out to Matt and express to him, man, I'm dealing with technology a significant chunk of my work day or work week, however you want to quantify it, and more than I ever thought I would. Recently, we had the good fortune to renovate a fitness center at one of our communities. And I was given the amazing opportunity to put all new equipment in. And I'm really, really particular about the kind of products I want based on what I know will help people to age well. And what I did not anticipate, so shame on me, but a lesson well learned, was the amount of technology that we were being presented with, even in fitness equipment. So for example, we put in Kaiser strength equipment. Well, they have this amazing interface now on every single piece of equipment that tells you your power output, your velocity, what your right limb is doing compared to your left limb. And all that data goes into a back office. And so God bless my fitness team at this community. They have embraced that learning curve, but it is a lot. Well, that's just one piece of the puzzle. I put in this awesome, neuro gym by DV Dot. There was education around that. a lot of our cardio has interactive dual tasking games, like the cyber cycle, and even new steps now have these awesome rides. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's just one piece of resident engagement, resident programming. That's just a fitness center. And I I had a learning curve. I'm not working in a fitness center day to day anymore. And plus, my fitness team had a significant learning curve because they have to now be able to educate all the residents on all this equipment so that they're using the equipment safely, that they're leveraging it to get the maximum benefits out of all these systems. I mean, it's amazing. And I know in my heart of hearts, we're going to make the biggest difference in overall quality of life for those individuals that engage with it. But it's just like, oh my gosh, I just didn't anticipate that. And that's just in that realm. But even when I think about some of the other technology-based tools that have come on the scene for resident engagement, I'm sure some people have heard of the Tover TOEFL table or the Tover TOEFL system that is often used in a memory care setting. That thing's awesome. Personally, I could sit there and play with it all day long. They don't pay me to do that, and I wish I could be paid to do that. But again, there's a bit of a learning curve, and there's a learning curve for all the staff who need to engage with it. And I love these solutions that are coming to the table. Residents like them, team members are drawn to them, which helps with the education piece. But it's the how do you present that education? How do you kind of QA that team members fully understand it, embrace it, and are going to then utilize it to execute to get the benefits that you want for your residents? And so I think we're in this unique crossroads right now because I think for so long, and you know this, Matt, like tech has always been viewed as our computers, phones, you know, platforms you're using for HR and accounting, right? But really, and I probably have a biased opinion, I will admit that, but I never thought I would contend with as much technology and interfaces and back offices and all that good stuff. And of course, I've learned from many wonderful colleagues in the space like yourself, like, do they integrate? If they do integrate, where's it going? What kind of data do you collect? Can you act on that data? And so, there's all these additional conversations that I'm having now. However, what I do like about all this, even though I would never have said a few years ago, hey, I'm super tech forward. I'm being forced to get there. But it's forcing me to really start to look at things a little bit different. And I'm getting this amazing opportunity at Westminster to really showcase the business case around just how powerful resident engagement is. And I'm able to do that because of technology.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing. And I know that's how we it was kind of like started this episode. You had reached out and talk about how all this time is being spent towards technology. And I'm even reflecting in my own life with resident engagement since I spent so much time there. Like it was surprising when something came out that wasn't had some component of technology in it. And
Right.
now, you know, with the reporting capabilities that we're seeing from some of these other platforms out there, it's just become the expectation with resident engagement. And to your point, I find a lot of people are able to kind of help make those asks for the budgetary dollars because they have technology to help support that overall story versus where I think in the past resident engagement used to be those just like one-off feel-good stories that we all see every single day that I think draws and keeps so many of us in the industry. But technology is one of those things now that can help craft that narrative and really understand who's attending what is longevity, quality of life, all that stuff for. And technology really helps to enable that. And I'm wondering, Kelly, like at what point, if you had a date, I don't know, probably too much for ask for a date, but at what point did resident engagement really just become so technology driven? And what do you think senior living communities really gained from that, or maybe even risked in losing in that shift?
Mhm. I and I think you'll agree with me. I think, during the pandemic, we had to embrace a lot of technology-based solutions. When we were doing all that social and physical distancing, you know, for lack of better words, we were almost forced to embrace a lot of technology in a way we had never done before, from in-house TV channels to Eversound. Matt and I worked a lot on using Eversound to help with that. um, ion dwell systems. I mean, you name it. There was just so much that we weren't leveraging these tech-based solutions prior to that. And so I think the pandemic forced us to, but we learned a lot of valuable lessons out of that. And I would say it's probably, I'd say 2023, that's just kind of where my head goes to. It's like we suddenly saw a catapult in tech-based solutions, point solutions. I mean, you name it, that we're all targeting resident engagement because I think people outside of the industry were like, oh, look at how senior living is solving to engage the residents to try and prevent isolation, prevent loneliness. And like all these startups kind of, showed up in the industry and we were all like, whoa, where'd you all come from? And I'd say I was around 22, 23. And then it was like, well, wait, time out. Do you understand our operating budgets? Do you understand, you might tell us, hey, our solution's only $100. You're going to engage your residents. And it's like, well, I'm also being confronted with about 85 solutions that are only $100 a month. And so, it has really forced us to pause and think about what is the impact we want to make? What is the impact we want on our residents? I know as part of our prep, we were talking about ROI and ROI in the business world, return on investment. And I agree with that. But I also equate ROI to return on impact because I kind of look at it twofold. Like, what will my return on investment be? But also, what's the return on impact? What does, if I go down this path of a certain spend, what's going to happen to my residents? And will I be able to prove that this investment has given the impact that I intended? And so, every day I think I'm confronted with new solutions. My LinkedIn just blows up with, hey, I got something for you. And I'm like, no, you don't. I have enough. You probably do too, Matt.
Uh, it definitely. I love the people that reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'm in Manhattan. If you want to grab a coffee," and I'm like, "I live 5 hours away from there." So, yeah, that's always my favorite one. But no, I think it's a great point, and I think to your kind of like 2022, 2023, I do think before that with COVID, really just money was being thrown out there, so people were more willing to invest in some of these quality of life resident engagement stuff. Like I remember during COVID an SVP of resident engagement reached out to me, and at that point we were working with like 30 out of three out of their 60 buildings, and she had said, Matt, one of the silver linings is we can finally get the money to support some of the stuff we've been wanting to do from the technology side. And then I think in 2022, 2023, that's when after these reports came around social isolation and the impact that it has on one's quality of life from like some pretty reputable places. And to your point, that's where I saw a lot of companies come in, sales pitch, we're under $100 per month. Why wouldn't someone do this? And to your point, you guys are getting hit and bombarded all the time with some of that stuff. To get some of these opportunities or things to kind of do and kind of filtering through all of that noise. And I love how you think about the ROI. I know I have another question about ROI. We'll get here in a minute, but um, actually, and I'm wondering from like a technology standpoint, Kelly, like how is that changing the way that you and your teams plan, staff, onboard, and really execute programming across the senior living community?
I'm glad you brought up the word onboarding. And and interestingly enough, I'm getting ready to do some rewrites of the job descriptions of the individuals I support out at our communities because I feel strongly that one of the bullets that's missing in a lot of these job descriptions is something related to a level of comfort with technology, willingness to embrace new technology, and that includes, but it's not limited to, apps and streaming services and AV. I think it's critical that we start incorporating that into all types of resident engagement roles. So you're promoting that in a role, you're interviewing to that, and then you have to onboard to that. And so I've rewritten our onboarding checklist about, hey, you have to go through this platform, this solution. It needs to be part of onboarding. So, my whole thing is I don't want anybody caught off guard, hired, and then like, what? I have to deal with all this technology stuff. And I'm very upfront about it in interviews. And so, I think it's an opportunity right now for the industry to really start to think about, are we being upfront with the fact, and this isn't even specific to even resident engagement. Look at what dining and culinary departments are dealing with. They've got point of sale solutions. They've got even the cool touchscreen things that, servers at your table and no different than you and me going to a restaurant and you pay tableside, or maybe in our case, you swipe your fob tableside. Like, they're being confronted with technology. Clinical most certainly is being confronted with technology, even maintenance and housekeeping. And oh, we got a robot that cleans carpets. Or in dining, we have a robot that will, bring out your salads. Like, it's, and I think that is kind of, I've been thinking about this a lot the last couple months, and I'm like, we are just in this place where it's here to stay. And so we have to figure out how to embrace it, but we also have to be, I think, really transparent when it comes to hiring and onboarding. But I think a piece that often gets missed, and this is not specific to anywhere, it's just, I think we miss often why we have these solutions. And I think if you take the time to also educate team members, whether longtime tenured or brand new, here's why we have these solutions. Here's why these solutions will impact our residents, but also here's how these solutions can help you to do your job more efficiently, more effectively, more timely, whatever. But I think that's always been a miss historically when embracing a new solution. It's like, oh yeah, team members, here's this training, where you need to really be mindful to get in front of it and educate them on why we want to embrace this. And here's what this means for you, so that there's early buy-in. And I think that early buy-in is the most critical piece to the success of utilizing almost any sort of technology solution.
Yeah, and I love how you guys are thinking about your job descriptions, onboarding, and stuff differently because whenever I've gone to the communities, I've seen life enrichment as kind of the, if there's not an IT manager on site, kind of the default help with not even just the AV or IT equipment around the community, but also the resident stuff as well. Which, that's just pulling away from other job responsibilities and duties. And, I know we've talked about this in the past, Kelly, that like, life enrichment, there's not a lot of great resources out there to like help them become, I'll say, tech literate, or maybe like the opposite of tech phobic. I have seen a lot of people be scared of technology at times, but like how can we just kind of teach some of those core basics, because it is such a pivotal piece in what a day to day in the life looks like today. Like, and I remember talking and making life easy too from the tech vendor side. I remember doing a presentation once. Life enrichment professional raised her hand. She says, Matt, I've got 13 apps on my phone, all required to do my job, and none of them talk to one another. So it's just like, ooh, that's not fun. Um, and and I'm wondering from your perspective, because we talked about ROI. I love how you think about a return on impact. And I remember talking to another provider that were like, Matt, if I had all the ROI that was promised to me, we would have millions of dollars right now, which just is never the case. But
Right.
when you and Westminster are evaluating like a new technology-based solution, what does that ROI conversation look like beyond the initial cost or the implementation effort? Like, do you find the return on impact is kind of a, adopted across your organization, or like how are other people thinking about that there?
I think I think when you put on like just an operations hat, of course they're thinking, okay, these are the dollars going out. What does this mean for the bottom line? What does that mean for margins? What does that mean for, potential changes in resident monthly fees? Because let's be real, what are we really dealing with, in senior living? We're dealing with resident dollars, right? It's their investment, it's their trust in our communities. And so, I take that very seriously. And I think it's why I will be rather staunch at times on spend. Um, and so, and I know I'm not alone in that. You put on that operations hat and you're like, okay, what is this going to mean? But then, put on, okay, but I also have a responsibility to really make sure my residents have the resources, the tools, the programs to live the best quality of life possible and to live life on their terms. And so I do think it's a lot of back and forth. It's a lot of weighing. Do we have an exact process? Not necessarily. Um, or at least I don't from in my world. I don't want to speak for my peers in other capacities. Um, but I really will look at, okay, where are we today with spend? And if I embrace a new tech-based solution, am I able to come in at the same price point? That's always my first thing, right? And if it is going to be a little more, how can I justify that? And then I start poking around, you know, does this solution exist elsewhere in the org and I just don't know it? Does what's a another example would be, oh, sorry. Um, do we have redundancy in technology solutions? So kind of like you're saying, like that person shared with you 13 different apps and none of them spoke to each other. I also start to dig into, do we have redundancies in technology or solutions that we've embraced? And maybe it's a redundancy in something in my world and something in a completely different world you would never think would have that same feature, right? And then it's like, well, wait a second. Do we need to eliminate some solutions so that there is the ability to have more dollars to spend? Because I really strive to try and not increase my current spend. I know that's probably me living in a, you know, utopian Stranburg world, but I really strive to try and keep, our fixed costs pretty comparable year over year. But that means really digging in and figuring out, where do all these dollars go? And then what does it mean for my residents? Matt, I am floored when I hear from a sales leader, hey, we had a prospect come in, they wanted to know what resident engagement platform we use. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Like, who even knows that vernacular
Yeah.
outside of our world, right? And residents are starting to come in and they're like, oh, like let's say you're a community that has, declining balance. They want to know, how will I be able to see that? Like, our consumer walking the door is probably more educated than ever because of the internet and what they're able to go and learn before ever stepping foot in the door. Plus, I think there is a significant, chunk of the industry where the residents who choose, especially in my world, a life plan community that has an entrance fee model, they've probably been pretty successful in their careers. They've probably traveled. Maybe they've been members of certain types of golf clubs, country clubs. So they've been exposed to a lot of these types of services and solutions in the hospitality world. And so they walk into our settings and they're like, do you have an app where I can see what I've been spending? Do you have an app where I can learn what's going on all day? It's starting to become a must have over the nice to have. And so I think you also have to take that into consideration when you're weighing out, how do I want to invest certain dollars or spend budgetary dollars?
Mm, I love that. Yeah, it's so true when you like even peel back the layers and look at some of the stuff of like what that could actually be. And yeah, it's really interesting of where technology is going. And I'm wondering from like the resident engagement side, because we're kind of talking about like, technology and tracking and reporting and all that looks like. And, from my point of view, participation is probably the easiest thing to measure, right? Did someone show up to an event? But of course, it doesn't tell the full story. And I'm wondering from like your perspective, what other metrics help you understand whether technology is like truly improving resident engagement, well-being, quality of life? I know you turned to talk about return on impact, but like, what
Right.
does impact look like to you?
Uh, I'll lean into the fitness stuff for a second, only because that's my easy place to go. But you know, that is an area where we can immediately, in as short as 8 weeks, if somebody stays committed to that program 3 times a week for 8 weeks, we can move the needle in strength, and I can measure that and I can see that. So I can have this amazing new interface can tell me that. It will tell me Matt got a little bit better each workout. It will also tell me Matt did not get better. And that should tell me as an exercise professional, whoa, what's going on? Why is Matt not progressing? What has happened? Is he sick? Does he have an injury? There's so many other thoughtful then follow-ups to do that. So I think, on the physical side of well-being, those metrics are so simple to capture. And you can look at it on an individual level, but then you can also look at aggregate data. And when you look at the aggregate data, if you're finding, hey, we're not moving the needle in people's balance, okay, maybe we need to go back, evaluate our programming. Do we have enough proactive offerings that really truly impact balance? And I'm saying how like a decade ago, I was putting everything on paper in Excel. I was doing all this in an old school way. And I did see, wow, we never moved the needle at all when it came to resident flexibility. And so I made a conscious decision to be like, all right, we got to be more mindful of how we're warming people up. We need more opportunities for stretching and range of motion, and we saw a difference in the next 6 months. So, for me, it was like, wow. And that wasn't even my goal of collecting aggregate data. I had not hypothesized that it would help me actually design programming. So it's just like one piece of it. I think the technology piece, when you think about, say, resident engagement platforms, I think the value of those and how they influence how residents spend their days. I mean, you have the communication piece, right? So they need to know what's going on every day. And sometimes things change. And when I think back to our paper calendar days, and we still have paper calendars, but you think about, oh, our distinguished speaker, Matt Reiners, he got delayed in his travel. He'll be here, but he can't speak at 2 p.m. We're going to push it to 3 p.m. I think back to the amount of work it took to make an operational change like that. And now it's like, here's this change, whoop, and everybody gets that information, right? And so I just think from an awareness of what you offer, I think how you even spread education on why different programs and opportunities and events will add value to their life. And it's all been simplified through technology. Is it everyone's favorite go-to? No, I'll say we still have some residents who are like, I don't want to have to look at an app. Totally fair, totally get it. Some days I don't want to look at apps, but we do. And so, when I look at data beyond the physical stuff, I think we're starting to get more into those true, satisfaction scores. So whether you use the Holleran survey or you use an internal tool or whatever, I really think technology will be a driver behind some of those satisfaction scores. And I'll be surprised if in the future, maybe something as structured as, say, the Holleran survey, they might even start to ask about technology, which wouldn't surprise me because it's everybody's starting to embrace it on some form or level. And so, I think when we start to look at other facets of well-being, here we talk a lot about purpose. Purpose is in our mission statement. Still fine-tuning how we really want to truly assess, if somebody feels yes, I have purpose, that's a highly personal metric to gauge, but we're going to figure it out because I do think that matters. And I do think the best way for me to go about that is to figure out how to embrace a technology solution to help me with that process, because it's great. I get the physical metrics, right? Got to keep people able-bodied, functional, go live life on their terms, live autonomously, do whatever it is they want to do. But then how does that feed into all these other things that bring them happiness and really make sure they're living their life with purpose day in and day out?
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I think, and from what I've seen, technology adoption amongst residents is only up and to the right. I mean, even if you look at the number of devices people are bringing into communities now. And what I think technology is so interesting from a life enrichment side, because like really before tech enabled solutions, it was always what's happening in these four walls, right? What's happening in this activity room. But with technology,
Right.
it's really opening up the entire world and like, doing all these such cool things that you couldn't even imagine was a thing before. So how do we like use technology, understand technology, get comfortable with technology, find the money for technology to really just like bring this entire vision to life? Um, and looking ahead, Kelly, I want you to look in your crystal ball here. My last question here for you.
Okay.
How do you see technology supporting healthy aging and longevity while still keeping human connection at the center of the resident experience?
I like that question because it's funny. As I've been noodling around, like, man, I'm dealing with tech a lot because anybody who knows me knows I'm a people person. It's what I excel at. It's when I walk into a building. Like I love meeting residents. I love meeting team members. It's my happy place. I like to connect with people. And so, that's something I want to make sure we continue to thrive at, and that is a big piece of our culture here at Westminster is our human connection piece. But I want to make sure that that never gets diminished or reduced in any way, and that technology should only help to further foster that. It's funny timing of that question. I just had a conversation yesterday at a community where they were talking about, this exercise class that they play on a in-house TV channel. And I was like, guys, while I appreciate that, at the same time, the other side of me says, but that means they're not coming out to class and engaging with others. Like at the end of the day, yes, exercise is amazing, piles of research on why that matters as we age. However, the one thing I've always appreciated about especially exercise classes in senior living is it brings people together. There's such a fun social connection piece to those type of offerings. There's banter and there's laughter. And I'm not saying you don't get that in other offerings, but the nature of an exercise class, or even if you're going out for a group walk, like on a beach or in a neighborhood, is you get to connect. You can gab, right? Even a water aerobics class. You're in the pool and yeah, you're working out, but you're talking to your neighbor. You're laughing with the people all around you. And a lot of times when we facilitate things where it's a speaker coming in, we go and we're with our friends and our neighbors, right? But we sit and we listen. And so for me, as I look forward, I would want to make sure that tech somehow has that opportunity to make sure people come out and they're together, but still able to socially connect through whatever that would be. And I think that is something I'm always considering. I remember my early days in senior living. I don't remember the name of the solution, but I was like, no, I'm like, it's too siloed. And it would only do one resident at a time. What this tech solution was, it was just solo resident use, and you had to like make appointments. And I was like, no, I was like, I don't like that. I remember the owner saying to me, how can you not like this? And I said, because I want people coming out and I want people to congregate together for the social connection piece. And so I think anybody in the tech industry, whether your platforms or your point solutions, they need to be thinking about how does my solution also help bring people together? Not necessarily, oh, I can impact strength or I can impact purpose or whatever. How does it bring people together? And I think as I reflect, even as I'm saying those words out loud, it needs to be something I keep top of mind because I never want technology to isolate people. I want it to make people come out and be together because we all know the biggest value add of communal living, like in senior living, is connection. Connectivity and connection and community is the number one lifestyle determinant of how well we age over exercise, over diet, and over sleep. Connection and community is number one. Let me say it again, everybody, those in the back. And so if your technology, even with the best of intentions, keeps people in their homes, keeps people in their rooms, whatever it might be, senior living or even aging in place at home, if it keeps them in their homes, we're losing a huge, huge benefit to aging well. And so that would be for me the biggest thing of how does tech still allow people to come together?
Yeah, I love that. And if I can just add my own thoughts, where I see like technology the huge about people coming together, it's like how do you gamify some of this stuff, right? Like how do you gamify the number of social meetups you have? How do you gamify the number of steps you're taking? How do you gamify how many fitness hours? And
Mhm.
getting everybody like competitive, get the competitive juices flowing, right? Like that's where I see technology playing like a huge opportunity. Of course, some people feel a way about wearables and all that sort of stuff, but like that's where I kind of see like the biggest opportunity for it. There you go. Yeah, yeah. All your data is everywhere now, but what are you gonna
Yep.
do? Cool. Well, Kelly, I really appreciate the conversation. Really grateful for our friendship over the years and just it's people like you that made me fall in love with this industry and so thank you, my friend.
Well, I appreciate you, Matt. I appreciate the opportunity to talk. Heck, we should talk again another year because who knows how far we will have evolved and even my own learnings and discoveries and opportunities to just make this part of our business just better and better and better. And of course, it really wouldn't be a Matt Reiner's Kelly Stranburg conversation if we didn't end with Go Bills.
Go Bills. There we go.